Welcome to this brief Bible dive with Beautiful Savior Lutheran Church in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, and with me, Pastor Nick. We're in these brief Bible dives where we're summarizing books of the Bible so that you can get a quick understanding of their message and why they matter. And today we're talking about the Letter of Jude. So first, who was Jude? Well, Jude was a half-brother of Jesus. Half-brother because they would have shared Mary as a mother, but of course Joseph and God would have been the different fathers. Jesus's father was God, and the other siblings would have had Joseph as a father. Although Joseph was the adoptive father of Jesus. As far as we can tell, during Jesus's early lifetime, Jude was not really a huge supporter of what Jesus was doing. In fact, as far as we can tell from Mark chapter 3, verses 21 through 31, John chapter 7, verse 1 through 5, Jude actually didn't really believe that Jesus was the Savior at first. But Jude did come to faith in Jesus after Jesus' death, resurrection, and then ascension. And then by the time that Jude wrote this letter, he was obviously not only a believer in Jesus, but a leader in the early church. So what happened is that Jude was having these debates with some people who were teaching all sorts of wrong things about Jesus, including telling them that there would not be a final judgment, so they could live their lives however they wanted without any worry about ethics at all, that there was no difference between right and wrong. These people thought that they had actually found a major loophole in what God was doing. They thought God had a loophole, and so now they could just drive right through that loophole like with a Mack truck and do whatever they wanted. Well, to counter them, Jude used some, let's just say, rather harsh language in this letter as he wrote against these false teachers. But he also encouraged the faithful people to be ready to defend their faith against false teachers or anyone else, which leads into the major takeaway from Jude's letter. And the major takeaway is this: it's important for us to be able to defend our faith at any given moment, but to do so lovingly and effectively. Also, that even though the grace of God abounds, and the grace of God is bigger than we could ever imagine, we don't want to abuse or even neglect the grace of God. Rather, we want to be grateful for grace. We want to respond accordingly, and then be prepared to talk about it at a moment's notice. In some ways, we live in a world much like Jude's, where people think that they've heard the story about God, but they really haven't, or heard the story about Jesus and God's mission through Jesus, but really haven't. This is actually why knowing our own stories of faith, it's a very important thing to do so. Or as Jude would say, being prepared to defend our faith at a moment's notice. Knowing our stories is important because that's how people come to hear and understand how faith in Jesus has an important impact in our lives, especially concerning the fact that most people don't really know the message of Jesus. They might think they know the message of Jesus, but there's a lot of times people haven't heard the core essence. Maybe they've heard tidbits from TV shows, maybe from the media, a sitcom, maybe a televangelist. C.S. Lewis talked about this. He's that Christian author who wrote things like Mere Christianity, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And he used to say that for people in the western part of the world, so that would be kind of, where I am in the United States, in the western part of the world, we have more of a difficult time believing in Jesus because we've actually been inoculated with just enough of a dead version of Christianity or of Jesus's message that we can't find the real Jesus in it. Now, we might all remember inoculations. We've been talking about it a ton over the last, couple of years with the COVID pandemic. But some of those original vaccinations, the earlier technologies, the vaccine would give a person a little bit of a dead virus, a version, and then the human body would see the dead, react to the dead virus, build up an immunity then to the live virus, so the person could not be infected. It's the same thing with our faith, and when we talk about Jesus, a lot of people think that they know about Jesus. In fact, from my experience, though, most people who think that they've rejected Jesus actually have not rejected Jesus. They've probably rejected a false version, a dead virus version of who they think Jesus is. but not Jesus himself. And that's why James says, be prepared to defend our faith. In other words, be prepared to talk about the living message, the living faith. And so some of these people have built up sometimes quite a substantial immunity to the real message of Jesus. But of course, the good news is that Jesus' good news can still get to somebody. It can still begin to work in them and soften up a hard shell that they've built around themselves. And that, again, gets back to the message of James. He was arguing with a lot of people who were putting some dead virus versions of Jesus' message out there. And it messed people up, and he didn't want that. Well, we all probably have some people in our lives who haven't heard the full core message of Jesus, of Jesus's love for us. They might think they've heard it, but there's a lot of people out there, even in our lives, who have not heard the real message of God's forgiveness and love, of God's desire to have a deeper relationship, for us to have a deeper relationship with God, of God's filling our lives with meaning and deep purpose as well. So that's the major message of the letter of Jude in a nutshell. To learn more about our congregation, we'd love for you to go to our website, bslcmi.org, and of course to share this video if you think it would help someone, to like it, to subscribe to the video. Now, go out and love God and love your neighbors.